Welcome to Financial Services What's Up?
This podcast brings together experts from the financial service world to figure out what financial market participants could and should be doing to embrace the biggest challenges and opportunities of the financial sector.
I'm Björn Ebert, the Financial Service Leader at PwC Luxembourg.
And I'm Sandra Paulis, an asset management partner at PwC here in Luxembourg, and very keen to discuss our industry together. And as usual, a warm welcome to my colleague Björn Ebert.
Hi Sandra, good to be back. I'm really refreshed after my holidays. I'm really looking forward to our podcast today. I'm already curious about our guests today.
Yeah, so in today's episode, we will dive into the dynamic world of asset and wealth management. I'm your host, and today we are really excited because we have an interesting discussion being lined up with two distinguished guests that are Mike Delano and Stephen Libby. Welcome to the two of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So Stephen, he is our expert in asset and wealth management, and he's also well connected to the world because he has his role in EMEA as being the asset and wealth management leader of PwC, but he also sits at the board of the Investment Fund Association in Luxembourg. And Mike, based in Luxembourg, more than 25 years of experience working both in the US and here, and our local asset and wealth management leader, talking to our clients and the Luxembourg market on a regular basis, so he knows exactly what's going on here in the industry. So happy to hear from the two of you. In this episode, we'll explore the industry, starting, of course, first with the big picture, and then we are looking at the success of Luxembourg. What actually drives this? What has driven the success? What are the hot topics of the industry? What are the products that are trendy also? And we're looking into the future, about technology, and where we see transformation happening. So sit back, relax, and let's navigate the asset and wealth management with our esteemed guests. So let's kick it off. As said, first I would like to have the big picture to see a bit where we stand in terms of industry. So we know that Luxembourg is the second largest asset and wealth management center in the world. So this is really impressive for such a small country. But trillions of assets. And I would like to hear more. Stephen, can you tell us a little bit more about the industry and some key facts around it?
Sure, Sandra. And thank you. Great to be here today. This is a big industry. It manages $128 trillion of assets for people. So basically, asset managers managing the capital, the wealth of their investors. And we expect at PwC that that's actually going to increase to 171 trillion by 2028, which is like about 6% growth. If you take that percentage of that within Europe is about 35 trillion at the end of 2023. And that we predict will grow to about 44 trillion. And that's in Europe. And of that, Luxembourg represents about 6 trillion of that amount. And we expect that to grow to about 8. So if you think about it, this is a lot of wealth that is basically in the hands of our industry within Luxembourg.
I'll write down that number. So you're saying in 2028, we are at 8 trillion in Luxembourg. Huh?
And that's only those figures that we have there. If we take into consideration private assets, which actually are even more, that number is even quite much bigger than.
Let's take already the 8 trillion as the first number to design the sphere in which we are. If we're looking a bit more about the industry and what it actually describes, the main characteristics that are around, Mike, would you share a little bit more and talk about the industry in terms of what is it actually about?
Sure. I mean, it is much broader than just big numbers. While Steve said they are pretty big numbers. Overall, the purpose of the industry itself is to help all of us, retail investors, institutional investors, from a savings perspective, right? So it's not just about asset managers making money. It's about them providing us different solutions. One of the key figures, actually, it was a session that we had at PwC last week for our staff that Serge Weiland quoted, and I found quite compelling, is if you think about it from a European perspective, so not just Lux, European perspective, you have roughly 40% of the household savings sits in cash and bank deposits. right? And it's great that we have that amount of savings, but sitting in a bank account, it's not earning a very, very good return. Up until recently, it was probably earning a negative return. And again, coming back to the numbers, if you think about what that 40% represents, that's 14 trillion euros. So, from an asset management perspective in Europe, if we're saying we're looking at 35 trillion currently, there's another 14 trillion that's not even in the market. So one of the goals, or one of the goals, I guess it would be, from an asset management perspective, is how do we get that money off the sidelines and into the economy?
So, Steven, your number will even grow more, if we succeed in that one. What would be the elements that would help actually making this succeed, that people are investing into it? What could help actually that
I think
aspect?
just to jump on what Mike just said, because I believe if you look to the US, Mike quoted 40% for the European households. In the US, it's 15, so 1/5. That's really a huge difference. And that also means that the Americans much more participating in the capital markets and in the growth we have seen in the last 10 years. And in Europe, we're always discussing, about the pension gap when you're getting retired. And that will, based on the projection, increase more and more. So there needs to be done something. And I think the European Saving and Investment Union, which is on the table, it's critical to that, because that will lift up and free up these 14 trillions. And I believe we should go to a model in Europe where we have a pillar 2, where you have a funded pension system into place. And not all of the countries have that yet. Some of them voluntary. And if you look, for example, to Sweden, it's mandatory. So part of your salary goes in a funded pension, and then you have a much better outcome when you retire. And that's, I think, it's really critical, and that's why the industry is really for that one.
And if I could just jump in, I mean, I think it's such an important point that Björn mentions, because today it is true. When you think about what is that big difference? So the U.S. market's so different, but that's because the U.S. market, people, just normal individuals, they know that they don't have this reliance on government pensions. So they need to supplement their income, that income that they receive once they get into retirement, with other means. And the asset management industry has played a vital role in providing basic investment solutions. And so in Europe, as Björn said, we have this gap between the needs of the individuals and in terms of what they will receive in terms of that retirement from governments going forward. And we know that governments, the budgets are tight. It's going to be even more difficult. So asset managers, even more important role.
I think outside of just pure pensions, if you think about, another important role from an asset management perspective is if you look at one of the quickly rising asset classes, infrastructure. Right? You see a lot of banks pulling back from lending. So you said infrastructure, also private debt, where, asset managers are providing money to small and medium enterprises to allow them to grow their businesses, something that banks may not be doing. From an infrastructure perspective, governments, as Steve said, governments' budgets are tight. They can't fund, improvements that are needed for roads, railways, airports, bridges, etc. So that's coming back to the asset managers to step in and fill that gap.
And there's a huge potential, because if you read the Draghi report, he mentioned you need 800 billion euros on top every year to fund the transformation. And there, I think the fund industry is really crucial for the years to come to play a role into that. Because as you said, banks are going out of that business, and the industry must be in there. And that's good. On the one hand side, you do the transformation, you make a better infrastructure in Europe. On the other hand, you have the retails and the people which benefiting from that, the end investors. So it's really a good, equalization of the two elements.
Okay, so there are definitely reasons why Luxembourg can stay successful in the future, when we're looking at the trends that you are just describing. But I would like also to look a little bit back to see what actually made Luxembourg successful in the first instance. Why is Luxembourg, this small country in Europe, becoming such a huge asset and wealth management center in Europe? Mike, you want to
I'm up
give
first.
some
Okay.
insights on that one?
So, I think from a Lux perspective, if you think about financial services overall, again, just trying to put the asset management industry into context, but financial services overall today, and we'll go back to history of why we've gotten here, but today equals roughly 25% of the GDP of Luxembourg. So it is a very large sector of the local economy. So it definitely has the attention of the government, has attention of regulators, and as you said, it is the second largest fund domicile outside of the U.S. and is the number one fund domicile from a cross-border fund perspective. One of the key, sort of defining moments that we like to quote, and not just because we're all from Luxembourg, well, none of us are from Luxembourg, which is also
interesting fact.
It is a strength of the country, I believe. The key defining moments, we were one of the first countries to implement a usage legislation 35 or so years ago.
The first,
yeah. And, that's really where it all kicked off, where, you had, massive interest from asset managers looking at Lux to say, wow, this is a fantastic new product that I can distribute in multiple different countries throughout the world. Some of our neighboring countries have very large asset management industries, but they are really local focused. So French funds that are selling to, French residents and German funds to Germans, where Luxembourg is had their funds are sold in 80 plus or 70 plus countries throughout the world. So I think that's one of the key factors of why the industry grew to such a large extent. And then a few years ago, we had a shift when really interest rates were flat. You had really low returns from a fixed income perspective. A shift into what we're calling alternative assets or the private markets. Right. And Luxembourg, again, because of the size of the asset management industry to the GDP, was very, very flexible, very agile, and looked at what are the types of vehicles that asset managers really need to make their private asset strategies successful. And we were able to implement, the RAVE, the SCSP, et cetera.
I think, and just to come back, what are the other ingredients that make Luxembourg so special? So I came over from San Francisco in 1996, so it's been a while. But I was just amazed at what you'll call this ecosystem. So just the way that the government, the regulator, and the industry work together to bring legislation so that basically you can bring innovation in terms of products, innovation in terms of the way that the market has evolved and can service those products as well. And that basically the working together, that spirit. If you think about it, Luxembourg, it is true. It's an industry. There's so many people that come from so many places around the world, end up in Luxembourg, somehow never leave, but then they all come together. They work together. The lawyers, the service providers, the accountants like us, to basically try to work with the government, to work with the regulator, to innovate, and that's something that is nowhere else on the planet. It is really unique, and that actually has allowed the evolution of this marketplace, which and it's one of the secret sauce, as it were, that I think that we have, that we need to really make sure that continues to be the case going forward.
And Steve, that's really, I think, an important point. You mentioned innovation, and Mike talked about the history with the usage and then the private markets. But if you, for example, look at the LTIFs as a new innovative product, Luxembourg was the first one looking into that. We have now 70% market share in Europe on that element. I think on one element, you say the hand-in-hand cooperation, is that, for example, at CSF, they build a LTIF group around that you get this product quite quickly approved and you have a speed to market, which is very well. So that's just an example about innovation.
Yeah, maybe for all the listeners that are not so familiar with the LTIF, so this is a product where we actually give the opportunity to retail investors to participate in private markets. So you mentioned infrastructure as well, being an asset class that was previously only reserved for institutional investors, and that now, through the LTIF as a product, that you can also invest in this asset class for the longer term. So this is definitely a hot topic, I would say. Also from a product point of view, you mentioned the RIVE, the SCSP, so continuing to evolve the toolbox that we are having here in Luxembourg. What else is there, in your opinion, to make it happening in the future so that Luxembourg remains relevant and actually on the forefront?
So one of the next things that's happening is this digital revolution. So of course, everything around the new technologies that are emerging, and one of them is blockchain. So this is a difficult one, right? So because it's a technology that basically has records, like set of records or blocks, and then those records are basically verified through what's called these chains. So there's different ways that there is a verification method of this digital ledger, general ledger. So it sounds quite complex. It is quite complex, but this is something that was really talked about quite a bit, and you didn't really see many applications of this. But Luxembourg was really smart in terms of looking at the technology and thinking about how to put in place laws and regulations that would allow for businesses to actually use and leverage the technology. And we're actually in the fourth iteration, so blockchain 4 law, which is giving the foundations, the legal foundations, the regulations, so that companies that want to use this can do so. And so this, I talk about that because it's important, because then we talk about another buzzword, which is called tokenization, which is basically a way that you can dematerialize so assets, or you can basically bring those assets to end investors. So you could just take an example and say, well, I want to invest in, as Mike was talking about, some piece of infrastructure, a bridge. Well, if you're an individual investor, that's a pretty big chunk of money to try to put to invest. But if you could basically bring that to investors and allow to, in small parts and small pieces, let's say, in what are called smart contracts, and these can be run on a blockchain, we can then do what's called tokenization. So basically spreading out this investment to the masses. And all that runs on this technology, which is then supported by the laws and regulations that Luxembourg has been smart and is now leading actually in terms of where we're at across Europe. So this is a super exciting area, Sandra, that will develop. We're still in the early stages. There's some experimentation going on, but we have actually real cases. So we have
Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so one of our clients, Franklin Templeton, just recently got approved to bring a new product, so a money market fund
Here in
Luxembourg,
Yeah.
using blockchain, a public blockchain, and basically that is going to allow them to increase the reliability, the cost, decrease the cost of transactions, and to leverage that technology for the benefit of the investors. So there's a lot of different reasons why that makes sense. And Luxembourg is a place. They started it in the U.S. Luxembourg is a place that in Europe that they're launching, which is again testimony to the innovation of this financial center and also to the CSF. So Björn was mentioning, we have a very well-educated regulator. And thanks to that, they understand the products, they follow the technology, the developments, and we're highly engaged in discussing how to bring this product to market.
This sounds extremely promising, huh? So when we talk tokenization, it sounds so fancy. So excited to hear more, and hopefully other products are coming. We have another asset class that is actually pretty prominent here in Luxembourg and also around the world, which is the ETFs, right? Mike, you want to share a little bit more about them?
Yeah, so ETFs, I mean, it is one of the faster growing asset classes that we see on a global basis, particularly with the real focus on costs, because ETFs is a pretty low margin product, meaning that the expense ratios are relatively low, quite attractive for investors. So, we've seen jurisdictions like Ireland, they've captured a large chunk of the passive market. What we are looking at from a Lux perspective, because we do have a lot of active asset managers that have product here, is around active ETFs. I know that is something that we've worked on as an industry. It's something that the government is focused on. They're looking at different legislation to make active ETFs more attractive in Luxembourg. I personally have a number of different clients who are looking at this either from a fund perspective or ETF as a share class. So, it is something to keep an eye on. It will be a continuing trend, I believe.
And this is where Luxembourg, again, here to increase the attractiveness. So what happened, the markets come together. We looked at some of the things that might be less attractive in Luxembourg versus other domiciles. And one of the results of that is the Luxembourg government last week just voted to basically eliminate what's called this subscription tax, so a tax on the product, which makes it less attractive. So this actually brings down again the cost. To Mike's point, so these are the attractiveness of these products is that they have a lower cost, and therefore investors obviously see the benefit of that. And so that is one measure, but there are other measures now that the marketplace is working on to increase even more and to compete definitely with our friends in Ireland. But I would say just to make sure that Luxembourg remains very, very, very much a viable option for them.
So it actually continues to be a journey, right? With fancy word, the tokenization, I quote you back, and the blockchain, more to come, ETFs, where we have really an advantage, especially in relation to the active ETFs, but it continues to be something where we all have to keep an eye on, to also respect or listen to what the clients want, what the investors want, so that we can fill the gap that we mentioned in the beginning. No, we can't make a podcast on asset and wealth management without speaking about transformation. And Björn, I know that everything that is Gen AI, this is very close to your heart. So I would love to hear your opinion and where you see the benefits in terms of transformation, and how do you see that bringing some advantages, especially for the asset and wealth management?
Indeed, Sandra, that's my favorite topic. I love to talk about that. And Steve talked about disruption, and this technology will disrupt the industry. If you look at the industry, especially also in Luxembourg, if you look at the value chain of the industry, there I think it's huge potential to upgrade the back office work. There's huge potential to create product efficiency gains with this kind of technology. And there's a lot of use cases, for example, summarizing all the board minutes with Gen AI, updating prospectuses with Gen AI, do all the paperwork with Gen AI. So there's a lot of use cases where we really can have
operational
efficiency, and then we get because we see in the industry that we have pressure on the margins, and that will also help to reduce the cost of doing business.
Now, top line. Yeah.
What's your view there? And then that's the bottom line. But on the top line, one of the latest reports also PwC issued is that what is clear is that the old generation will shift the money to the younger one. And that means the younger one are much more tech savvy than probably we are. And that means with Gen AI, you can much more tailor the offering to the younger ones. You have, tailored portfolio offering, tailored, marketing efforts to the younger ones. And that is something where the industry should focus on. And that will also create additional revenues.
And hopefully catch then the savings that are currently sitting on the bank account. Yeah, so we are coming slowly to an end of our discussion that I really enjoyed. And we have a little tradition, which is to say that we want to wrap it up and ask our guest about a number, which has recently caught their attention. So, Mike, you want to go first? What is your number?
What's my number? I guess, without being too, not say arrogant, but without being too much, I would say 1. Number 1.
Tell me more about
Tell me
the
more.
one.
Why
the
number
one?
Just thinking about Lux, a little tiny country. I have a story similar to Steve, where I haven't been here quite as long, but still almost 18 years. Come to Luxembourg, middle of Europe, massive asset management center. I had no idea coming from the US that it was the second largest fund domicile. But I'd say my number 1 comes from, it is the largest cross-border fund domicile in the world. So for asset managers that are looking to reach more than just their local markets, can you afford not to be in Luxembourg?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the distribution also to Asian countries, US countries, and Europe, so the whole world can be reached from Luxembourg. Steven, what is your number?
Yeah, so initially I was thinking about 1, but actually now as Mike was talking, I changed, and I think my number is going to be 10. And why 10? Well, I talked about making, we have predictions that perhaps Luxembourg will get to 8 trillion, but I kind of like 10. So I think 10 should be our ambition, and beyond, of course. But I think Luxembourg, for all the reasons we mentioned, has the success that it will continue to be successful. And that's the number for me is 10 trillion.
By when? You dare to say a number?
Let's say 2030.
Okay. I'll take note of that one. So thank you very much to the three of you. It was a pleasure to talk to you, and looking forward to our next episode. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.